It is another Fairbanks Friday edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. On today's episode, we will be discussing both game ones of the Eastern and Western Conference Finals. We're going to talk about the players who took to Instagram and what that means for the Panthers front office and players. And then we're going to discuss Anton Lundell ready to become the 2C, for the heading in the 2022-2023 season. We discuss that and more all on today's episode of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
Your Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
And welcome into this Friday, June 3rd edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We're your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez from PantherParkway.com. You can follow me on Twitter at Monoman12. Follow the show account on Twitter at LO_FLA Panthers. And thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. Don't forget to also subscribe to Locked On NHL and the Crosscheck NHL show with Andrew Berkshire and Mary Clark will be covering all the postseason activities around the National Hockey League. So we're at that point in the postseason now where both conference finals have had at least one game done, and it's been fun to watch. And like I said to Kyle Sullivan of Locked On Avalanche, it's kind of great when your team's not playing in the aspect of that you're not stressed out and watching these goals go left and right. I mean, in game one, if that was a Panthers game, my heart probably would have came out of my chest. Like, not gonna lie. But of course, we want the team that we cheer for to advance far into the postseason. And it's and there's a lot of conversations worth having when it comes to what this team needs to do in order to officially become Stanley Cup champions. And on Monday's edition of the show, unless there's some breaking news that happened for the Panthers, I put out a poll on Twitter asking, what is the championship window for the Panthers? Is it 1 to 2 years? Is it 2 to 3? Or is it 3 to 4? I want everyone, if you're able to go on there and answer the question, and we'll be discussing that on Monday's edition of the show. And we'll be discussing more about that. But it is a Fairbanks Friday. Let me not take too much attention away from Nick on the show. Let me welcome him in and bring him in on the show. So Nick, you got a little bit of a different vibe there going, just like as you talked about last week. So welcome back to the show.
Thank you, and it's great to be back. And I'm trying to bring back the Indiana Jones slash Daniel Plainview look. If you've seen There Will Be Blood, I just like the fedora look. And, we'll see where it goes. I have to say, ever since we last talked, I had to shave 3 times, which is unusual. Usually, with hockey, I kind of let it go a little bit. But, it's a little change. It's getting warmer down here. But, looking forward to this episode and seeing what we can get into with Mr. Lundell.
Yeah, now we will save that for the third and final segment of the show. And for me, the mustache for me was always very uncomfortable for me. So growing that out during the playoffs, so I'm just thinking, this is so annoying. But hey,
they have a filter for that now, so you're good.
Yeah, for real. But as far as the conference finals and as far as the rest of the postseason going on, I mean, game one was just bananas for the Western Conference Final. And the thing that's talked about most throughout the NHL world is that offside that wasn't for Cale Makar. And I gotta say though, I do think that it was offside. However, we got to give a little credit to Cale Makar and his skating ability. The fact that he was able to manipulate and fool the referee, let the puck loose a little bit to to draw the not for it to be not possessed for him entering the zone and making that into a goal. So there's two ways I see it. I see it as it's a blown call, but I also see it as Cale Makar, you're just an extremely gifted hockey player. What says you of that play?
Well, I think you have to be good to make things look like that, and you have to be good to be lucky. So hats off to Makar for doing whatever he did to make it look like he lost the handle and then got it right back. But no, I think that if this was even during the regular season, that they would have called it offsides. I mean, I've seen ticky tack plays where the puck just crosses the line and nobody really has clear possession, but it was hit by the offensive team, and yet there's somebody on side or offsides, and yet they blow it. So to me, it's like, ooh, that's really got to hurt for the Oilers. And going to through the game progression, if they would have called that goal off, we may have been talking about, an Oilers 1-0 lead in the series, because they probably would have gone into overtime possibly. So you have to expect that the Oilers are going to come out even better this game. And maybe they're not going to put up 8 or 9 goals. Hopefully it'll be a more standard, maybe 3 or 4 goal game. And we'll see what happens, because they still have their starting goaltender where Colorado does not.
Yeah. Like you said, Darcy Kemper will not be playing. It'll be Pavel Francouz. The winner who's like I said yesterday, he's a little bit of a late bloomer entering the NHL in his late 20s, and here getting his shot, and a good season for a backup goaltender, a pretty decent season. And the person who was offside that wasn't, it was Nichushkin. I was looking up the number of the player that was offside, but yeah, not a call. But then some of the plays that we saw in the skating ability of Colorado, like Nathan McKinnon putting Darnell Nurse on skates multiple times, and the speed factor. And it just, I also asked myself, where was that for the Panthers? Where was that with Barkov and Huberdeau showing that kind of explosiveness? Because Barkov is a gifted skater as well, just like McKinnon. We didn't really see any of that for the Panthers, and I'm seeing that. And now let's transition over to the Eastern Conference Final, where Game 1, the New York Rangers defeat the Tampa Bay Lightning by a final score of 6-2. A funny tweet by at David954FLA said that the Tampa Bay Lightning need to be six to their stomach. So that was a pretty funny comment that David had there. But Nick, the New York Rangers doubled the amount of goals than the Panthers did in 4. It kind of makes that loss and that sweep to Tampa Bay look a lot worse, wouldn't you think?
Definitely, but you have a goaltender in Andrei Vasilevsky that I think got into a groove, coming out of Toronto and then going into Florida, and then he had some time off. You really can't.
That's fair.
You really can't, I guess, compare one game to a series per se. I mean, for who knows, as good as he is, Vasilevsky could actually just shut out the Rangers for the next 4 games straight. And I wouldn't bat an eye thinking that wasn't possible. But I think it has more to do with, and I think you and I spoke about this, or at least mentioned a comment about it. Like, is it doing with coaching, or is it the players that really came out wanting to do something? And you said something to the fact of, it might be more coaching than the players, which then kind of shifts the conversation to, well, there's still kind of an interim tag next to Andrew Burnett's name, and there's a coach over there named Gerard Gallant, who the Panthers used to employ and unfortunately had to call a cab for. We're still living that down because the media will still, bring it up from time to time. And they did it against the Canes series. But you have to wonder if Florida had I'm not calling Burnett not a competent coach, but somebody who had experience in that type of level of game, if the series would have gone a little bit differently, or the changes that needed to be made would have made sooner, or at least the type of play would have been different. So that's the thing that I wanted to point out. But hats off to Gerard. I'm very happy he's found success in another place as well. But it looks like it's going to be a good series over there, and it's going to go longer than a lot of people think.
Mm-hmm. And the Igor's better chants were just hilarious. Like that.
Yeah.
New York fans are ruthless. Of course, we it's no secret when it comes to that. But the Igor's better chants were just great, and of course, you have to come out with a little bit of a statement. That's a confidence boost. I mean, you also think about that the Rangers were just 2 days before that playing a game 7, so they're in the groove of playing a game, while the Tampa Bay Lightning had 8 days off, 9 days off. So, like you said. And right before that, for the Tampa Bay Lightning, they went to a game 7 with Toronto, so they had that quick turnaround. So that makes a big difference. But like you said, I wouldn't bat an eye if the very next game, now that the Tampa Bay Lightning have a game under their belt in this series, it could be a very dangerous. Series for the New York Rangers. And I just going into game 1, and I'm just seeing this from a Panthers perspective. Not wanting the Tampa Bay Lightning to advance. I say it like this. I'm like, New York, you got to win both games at home. Win both games at home. And I'm just thinking about it, please. Because if Tampa Bay wins one, I think New York's in trouble.
Definitely. And, to get back to your point, that Igor's better, Vasilevsky does, he's a very quiet guy, but he does take things and use it as billboard material.
Yes.
And I'm pretty sure he took a couple things from the Panthers this season when they lit him up, that he took it personally and he made a statement, and he did it in the playoffs, obviously. But now you have the chance in New York. I have to think that he's going to come out and he's going to put on a spectacular performance. But as you were stating, that if Tampa Bay gets a game in New York, they basically did their job. If they get one on the road, then they did their job, and then they can come in at home and take care of business when they feel more comfortable. They know that they have the best, defense, in my opinion, in the playoffs left, and that they can play their game. It's never easy to play on the road, but if they can at least get that one and split it, then I think that it favors them heavily going forward.
I'd be very nervous if they won game 2, that's for sure. But you mentioned Andrew Burnett. You talked about coaching in this series, so we're going to actually relate that in what we're going to talk about in the next segment of the show, where a handful of Florida Panthers players took to social media to thank fans a week after they got eliminated. Let's discuss about what that could possibly mean in the next segment. But first, we're going to tell you all about BetOnline. And BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your betting stats and sports info. Find all the latest sports developments, news, and odds, including this year's basketball championship matchup, Stanley Cup playoffs conference, Major League Baseball, and of course, the latest fighting news from MMA to UFC and boxing. BetOnline is your continuous source for all your sports wagering information, including live betting, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use a mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Second segment here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast on this Fairbanks Friday edition of the show. And before we get to our second segment, we have an important favor to ask you. We put together a survey so we can learn more about the listeners like you and make your favorite Locked On podcast even better. This is your opportunity to tell us what you like and don't like about Locked On Podcast. Go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey right now to get started. It won't take very long, and everybody that completes a survey can qualify for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Ticketmaster gift cards. To take our audience survey, go to lockedonpodcast.com. So, Nick, we had a little bit of a discussion in the chat about multiple players starting to take to social media. And I found that the timing of it, that it was within a 24-hour block where multiple players were starting to thank fans. I actually wrote the list down. I think I saw Duke, Gus Forsling, Ryan Lomberg, and someone else. I don't know the fourth one.
Huberdeau.
Yes, Huberdeau on the top of my head. Yep, Huberdeau. So we saw all of them take to Instagram, like over a week after the fact that they got eliminated, and that kind of tells me that the Florida Panthers management is kind of done speaking with every individual player post postseason.
Mm-hmm.
They are ready to go off into the summer. And Jameson Olive and Doug Plagan spoke about it on Territory Talk about also, which is good for us Panther fans to hear, that a good portion of is staying in the area to train during the summer. So that's some good news. Very few players are gonna travel out of town for their off-season training. But that also tells, but again, going back to the post, that tells me I think they're finished with most of their interviews, and that
Mm-hmm.
also tells me that we might be one step closer to a decision on Bruno, whether to remove the interim tag or not. Because when we talk about it with the perspective of Vegas, 13 days after the season ended, that they made a decision on Pete DeBoer. Marty St. Louis, it wasn't announced until yesterday, even though we kind of knew that he was going to stay. But
Mm-hmm.
this for the Panthers is still up in the air. And I think about it as the Panthers, which is with it. The Panthers are doing their due diligence, and they're talking to each and every individual player to see what is the fit. What did you like that Andrew Burnett did? What did you not like that Andrew Burnett did? Do you relate to him well? Is there a situation where X, you didn't like where X did this, the way he spoke to you, yada yada yada? And I think this is a good thing that they're doing their due diligence with it, regardless of whether they not.
Yeah, and I think the longer this plays out, I think the longer, I mean, the more evident it's going to become that they're looking elsewhere, because I think the Florida
Mm-hmm.
Panthers need to do their due diligence with this group. Players may love to play for Bruno. I mean, some players said that he loved to play for, what's his name, Bugner, and
Mm-hmm.
a lot of players said they love playing for Gallant and everything. And I know there was a huge backlash with that, but ultimately, a coach needs to hold his players accountable.
Yes.
And I don't know if a lot of that happened when Bruno took over. Bruno came in to make sure that the ship wasn't going to get rocked. Now, did he bench some people or scratch some people in the playoffs? Yeah, he did. But I think it was a little bit too late for that, especially when you're trying to win a series. You needed to send that message way in the season saying, hey, listen, this is not how you play, or this is not how we're going to win. You need to play this way, or you need to get better. So I think with this group, going back to also your question, or what you're asking everybody is, what's the window for the Florida Panthers? If they go back to Bruno, maybe their window is maybe a year.
Mm-hmm.
If they bring in somebody else, like maybe a Barry Trotz or another well-established coach that has a track record, I'm willing to say that their window is maybe more 3 or 4 years, because at least in my opinion, those coaches they already have the resources there. They can make players better. I can't say that about Bruno, because I think he got keys to a Lamborghini and basically was able to steer it in a way, but then forgot to stop at the gas station and ran out of gas in the playoffs. Now, a tenured coach like, again, a Trotz, or I will throw this name back in there because personally, I don't think he's out of it, and he'll have to ask for forgiveness, but Quinville. If he is allowed back and he is offered the Panthers job again, I think that is something that will resonate in the room again, and he will hold people accountable, and he will get the most out of the players when it's needed, and he'll know when to refuel.
Mm. Like I said with Jacob last week, I don't know if the Panthers want that smoke in relation to Quenville coming back. As far as
Mm-hmm.
as coaching, and this is a results based league for the NHL, and the Bill Zito's got to ask himself, because Andrew Burnett did say publicly that I didn't make the adjustments necessary. Bill Zito also has to ask himself, can I be patient enough with this coach to wait for him to make the necessary adjustments?
Mm-hmm.
It's a gamble, regardless of what you do. So it's something that Bill Zito I'm very, very sure that that's something that Zito is asking himself, and it's just something that I've been thinking about. It's like, man, is it going to be removed? Is it not going to be? But I trust Bill Zito that regardless of which way he goes, I still think that he ends up actually getting one more year. I still think that But if Zito ends up going the other direction, I have no reason to doubt him.
You bring up a terrific point, and at least Burnett was honest and upfront and transparent about what he said, that he didn't make the adjustments. This is why I say that Florida, if they want to have their window open longer, that they need a coach that has tenure and knows when to make the changes and make the adjustments. Because this team right now, they can't afford to waste another year. Barkov and Huberdeau have been here. I know Barkov's, signed. Huberdeau isn't. And then on top of that, you have to start thinking about other core players and all these complementary pieces that you've signed for at least 3 or 4 years. You're going to waste another year trying to, go with this coach to make adjustments and everything. I don't think it bodes well. This team is built to win now, and you have to do it in the next 2, 3, or 4 years before everybody starts getting older and you start needing to move other pieces around.
And luckily, and we saw what happens when you're tied up in big contracts and then you're trying to rebuild after. I mean, one team out west is the San Jose Sharks, who have a lot of pretty bad contracts on their team, and they're just trying to get out of the cellar. So they're trying to get out, and we hope that the Florida Panthers are not in that situation because I mean, I'll reiterate this later next week of how trade deadlines especially can make the selling teams manipulate the buyers to buy more because of where the cap is and from there. And it gives an opportunity for the team selling to make a huge jump, and it also gives an opportunity for some buyers to fall off a cliff too as well. So it's a possibility that's out there. We don't know which teams it's going to be right now. We don't know that at this point in time, but it's the possibility is out there for this team for it to happen.
Yeah, considering they don't have any first round picks for the next couple of years. So you're going to have to either hit on a couple of draft picks, in the later rounds, like the good teams do, and they always find talent that way. Or you're really going to have to start squeezing every little ounce that you can out of the players that you have on the roster right now. So tough place to be right now, but you can't fault Zito for going all in to try to put this team over the top and win now. So honestly, it's probably the first time that the Florida Panthers have been in a position to do that. And I really have no regrets. It's just, this is the price we got to pay now.
Yep. I back Zito Claude Giroux trade because, of course we can see hindsight 2020, them being eliminated. At the time we're not going to say, oh no, what are we thinking? We're going to see this taken around. No. We go back to that and you probably do that again as far as the Claude Giroux trade. Ben Sherratt, maybe you do it a little differently, but the Claude Giroux one, I'll definitely have Zito's back on making a trade for a big impact player that definitely makes a difference maker for this team. And listen, there's still a chance to bring him back. It's not a 0% chance for this team. Very unlikely, but there's still a very, very there's a chance there. But speaking of centers, speaking of wingers, since we just mentioned Claude Giroux, we're going to talk about a specific center, a young center on this Florida Panthers team, one that Nick is a big fan of. If you could see this episode, Lundell, we're going to talk about him in the next segment, where we're going to ask the question: is Anton Lundell ready to become the 2C for the Florida Panthers? We'll discuss that next on this Fairbanks Friday edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Third and final here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, Fairbanks Friday edition of the show. I'm Armando Velez. I got Nick Fairbanks here on this Fairbanks Friday edition of the show. So we, at this time last year, I mean late May, for when you came on after Game 6, that clip, that very, very iconic clip of you talking about Mr. Lundell, you can come on down, and I was signaling 3C at the time, when this was before this podcast was even on YouTube at the time, and just thinking about knowing at the time that he was going to be the guy there as far as that bottom six. I mean, he's going to be 21. He's going to be 21 later this year or sometime next year. I don't know when his birthday is, but he's 20 years old is what we know. But for the steps that he took this year, of course, he battled a little bit of injury this year. And when we ask the question, is he ready to take the 2C for the Panthers? That means that one person might have to, position anymore. And who was the 2C this past year? Sam Bennett.
Bennett.
Yeah, and listen, I love Sam Bennett. I thought it's still a great trade for what they made with Calgary. Two twos. Would you give another one, Nick, for Sam Bennett?
Yes.
Okay. Just making sure. But Sam Bennett, in the first part of the season, he missed a little bit of time, but still 25 points in 31 games in the first half of the season. 17 goals, 8 assists. In the latter part, of the season, 11 goals, 13 assists. The production dropped a little bit, but he was still very well into the top six as far as points for the Panthers. Meanwhile, though, even strength, though, goals per 60 minutes, Anton Lundell is higher than Sam Bennett. But the average time on ice, even strength, is only 1 minute less for Anton Lundell versus Sam Bennett. And average PK time, we see Anton Lundell playing valuable minutes on the PK as well. Sam Bennett, according to Hockey Reference, his average time on ice shorthanded, I believe I saw was 46 seconds on. Yep, 46 seconds. So as far as like versatility for Anton Lundell, of course, that's where Anton Lundell has an advantage as far as that part of his game versus Sam Bennett. And I know Sam Bennett's a little older, and he has 3 years left on his contract. The cap hit is very friendly, pun intended there, by the way, $4.4 million for 3 more years. And I got to ask you, Nick, we could very well much disagree here, but I want to ask you first before I answer. Do you think Anton Lundell is ready to become the 2C next season?
If you're looking everything based on numbers, of course, he can take it. Now, it really comes down to chemistry and if he can take on that extra added responsibility during the season. We saw him kind of disappear in the playoffs, but I want to say that I think probably in mid-season, if he's shown that he can take on that responsibility, yes, he can. I think right now, just with the way that the lines are set up, I think he's perfect on the third line with Marchment and also Reinhart. We may not have Marchment into next season, but I think right now you have to balance out all the lines to make everybody effective. But everybody's calling him Baby Barkov. The jump that Barkov made from his first to his second season was actually pretty astounding. I don't know if Lundell's going to have that extra step. And it's not that I don't think he can do it. I'm the, fan club #1 fan or whatever over here, but I want to be cautious and I want to think that, he may take a little bit of a dip into his second season, have that somewhat sophomore slump and then come out of it at the end of the season much better and maybe not rush him into too much responsibility. Now, I mean, they do have Bennett there that actually works really well with Huberdeau. I just think they need to find a consistent winger, whether that's Duclair or Hagee's never going to lead the first line as far as I'm concerned. And then, you just got to find that sixth wing, the sixth person in your top six in order to play with them. So would I love for him to start the second, on the second line center for start the season? Yeah, definitely. But is it going to be better for the team? That I don't know. I don't think they're quite there yet.
Mm-hmm. And let's look at what what Barkov did in his first 3 seasons. I'm going to do a little bit of a screen share for everybody. The jump for Barkov, you were just 1 year off there, Nick. The jump for Barkov as far as point production went into his third season. And guess which year that happened to be when Barkov took that jump? It happened to be the year where Jaromir Jagr mixed for the Panthers. Look how important that season was for someone like Barkov and Huberdeau. I mean, we talk about it, and the numbers definitely back that up for the Panthers. But we also got to consider this. We also got to consider that injuries do happen in the middle of the season as well. And if they were to ship out Bennett and put Anton Lundell right there right away, and you think about the cap hit for Bennett, once again, it's a pretty good deal for the Panthers of what they got there. So I don't think that Bennett is going to be on the Panthers when we get towards the end of that contract, but I still think that he's around next year for the Cats and manning that second line, at least for now, still being a little behind. But if you were to put there and an injury happens and Sam Bennett that happens to not be on the team, you have to mix so many things. And I know that so many players can play wing and as well as center. I mean, Sam Reinhart can do it as well. So but then you're putting different people in different places. And of course, we're expecting to see some of the people down in Charlotte possibly make their place into the lineup next year. We're hopefully expecting players like Cole Schwitt to be in the mix, Grigory Denisenko to finally have a full-time spot on this team as well. So that's one thing that we're hoping for the forward lines. And maybe it'll be too much of mixing and matching, and it could overwhelm someone like Anton Lundell. Does that mean that does that mean that he could possibly thrive? Absolutely, he could. He very well could. He's played on different levels. He's played World Junior. He plays World Championships. He even in a training camp injury that season, many players were being sent down, and still he was never sent. He was never sent down, and the question was, is he going to be on the lineup? Is he not? And the longer he was there, the more we were to believe that he was going to stay. And then the first thing we hear about what his main role is going to be, penalty killing. It starts on the defensive end. That's what we talk about when we talk about young prospects. I mean, we're seeing that with someone in New York, Alexis Lafreniere. Like, he might not be producing on the Lafreniere might not be producing on the too much on the score sheet offensively, but we're seeing how great defensively Lafreniere has been playing throughout these as well. So I think we know he's going to be there defensively. Imagine I'm sure that his production would take a jump playing on the same line as Huberdeau and Duclair and possibly a Reinhart, and if they bring back Giroux as well, I'm sure it's going to be there. But as far as, like you said, balance, it's going to take a little. You're like you said, the championship window is now for the Panthers. It's okay to still continue to try to spread the wealth throughout the lineup.
I'm so glad that you brought up Lundell possibly playing with Huberdeau, Giroux, or even Duke. One thing that you could really say about Lundell's game outside of him being a defensive, master like Barkov is the fact that he has more of the offensive, mindset. I mean, he'll take shots, he'll set up plays. I honestly think that him going down low actually would help Huberdeau, because let's be honest, Huberdeau doesn't go down low. He doesn't like the board battles too much. He doesn't really get dirty. Lundell does. I think that would help. Bennett does, but for some reason, I don't think he wins a lot of board battles. He did earlier in the season, but as time went on and everything like that and going into the playoffs, he just wasn't noticeable. And then you either have Giroux or Duke. You have basically snipers or another playmaker that I think would benefit greatly from a center who can play with the puck down low, get them the puck and, just put it on net, and then maybe somebody pick up a garbage goal. So if Lundell does get the opportunity to play on the second line, I would definitely love to see it. I will say this. Let him play the second line center against Detroit. I would love to see him because he owned Detroit last season, and he owned both rookies that were in the running for Rookie of the Year. I mean, we already know who's going to win it, but just to see that he was putting up points and scoring goals and playing, both ends of the ice against both of them, it was just a treat to see.
And let's not forget that he missed the first matchup against Detroit this season as well. He played the other three, and he definitely like we say, if he played that full season, he definitely would have been in the conversation. It's not. Listen, this is about development for a young kid. He's 20 years old. Eventually, he's going to make his way there. And I would like to see one or two games in a span of a few weeks to see him there, even to just give it a try, because you're gonna make your line changes and adjustments in the middle of the season. I mean, for crying out loud, we saw Ryan Lomberg on the second line for a little bit this season, and we called him Lombardo. So that was fun during that time. So we will see Lundell in an increased role next season, and it's gonna eventually take him that once that third season hits. I think that the third season of him being on the team, I think that's when he's going to be the 2C for the Panthers.
Yeah, and I think following next season, I think he will cement being 2C, but we got to think about what's best for the team right now. And if with their window, like we said, maybe the third line is still good for him, but that doesn't mean that he can't learn on the job, pick up valuable, experience, and then maybe play more in the playoffs than he did. We talked about this on a previous show. I don't blame Bruno for sitting him during the playoffs and everything. It just didn't seem like he was being a huge factor out there. And, it seemed like the season really got to him. So we'll see what he comes out with here in the second season. I can't wait to see it. And who knows? I mean, we might have more fans on the Lundell train or the fan club here soon.
Definitely. If what we saw, if there's any jump for what we saw him in year one, we're gonna definitely have some fun and definitely many more conversations about Anton Lundell next season for the Florida Panthers. I mean, and he's one of the 4 or 5 untouchables on the roster. That's the one. He's one of those that it's just like you're keeping him around. Don't keep this guy. He's a special one. That's for sure.
Yeah. The Panthers have always wanted a 1 and 2C and everything, and this is your chance to have that for a very, very long time. And all the great teams or the dynasties that you want to talk about have always had that. So I think Florida's set up for success in the future.
No doubt. And it's gonna be fun for both Barkov and Lundell. For Barkov and baby Barkov, of course. But Nick, I want to thank you once again for joining on this Fairbanks Friday edition of the show. We're going to be pumping more of these off-season topics as we continue on in the summer. The Stanley Cup playoffs might be going on. The Florida Panthers season might be over, but we are keeping that same energy alive here on Locked On Panthers, because this is a team worth watching, and this is a team worth talking about in a market like South Florida. They got their playoff win off their back, but we're still going to be continuing talking about this team on Locked On Panthers all throughout the offseason. So, Nick, tell everybody where they can follow you online.
As always, guys, you guys can follow me on Twitter at Prudentia0, and then also follow work on it's been a while. Haven't written an article in a while, actually. So pantherparkway.com. Should hopefully have something coming out this summer, but I think right now this podcast is doing just fine.
Definitely, and you never know when he could surprise you with one of those. So Nick, thank you so much for coming on, and see you next Friday.
See you then, Armando.
Like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Make sure to subscribe to the Locked On Fantasy Hockey and the Crosscheck NHL show with Andrew Berkshire. Clark will be covering all the activities around the National Hockey League. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. And for your second listen of the day, make sure you listen to today's episode of Locked On NHL. Locked On NHL covers the playoffs like no other. Hear the latest news and opinions from local experts every Monday through Friday. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. Sarmamanda Velez, with Nick Fairbanks. And you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.